In Crystal Creek, Wyoming, a small-town cowboy is about to cross paths with the wealthiest woman in America, and he has no idea. Jack Harrison, struggling to save his family ranch, takes on repair work at the local saloon after a devastating storm. The quiet, unassuming owner who hired him is actually Elizabeth Sarah Blackwood, the country's richest woman who's secretly escaped her high society life in search of something real. As Jack works to restore the old saloon's weathered boards and broken windows, these two souls from completely different worlds begin to form an unexpected connection. She sees in him the genuine spirit she's been searching for. He finds in her a kindred heart he never expected, but every day brings them closer to the moment when her true identity will be revealed. Will the truth destroy everything they've built, or prove that some things money can't buy? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The moment Sarah closed the door to her small apartment above the saloon, she shed her carefully constructed persona like a second skin. Kicking off the deliberately scuffed boots, she pulled a burner phone from beneath her mattress. Her third. This month, 27 missed calls, 52 text messages, all from people who knew her as Elizabeth Sarah Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries, and according to Forbes, the wealthiest woman in America. "Not now," she muttered, but thumbed through the messages anyway. Her corporate secretary was having a meltdown about the Tokyo merger. Her board was threatening an emergency meeting. Her sister had texted a link to yet another tabloid speculation about her mysterious disappearance. A notification from her banking app made her wince. Someone had tried to trace a transfer she'd made to the Crystal Creek municipal account for the saloon's purchase. She'd been careful, routing it through several shells, but they were getting closer. The floorboards creaked as she paced, mind racing. When she'd bought the saloon, on impulse, after driving through Crystal Creek on her secret cross-country escape, she'd told herself it was just temporary, a few weeks of anonymity, of being nobody special before returning to her real life. But watching Jack Harrison work today had stirred something in her. The quiet confidence in his movements, the respect he showed for the building's history, the way his eyes held no agenda when they met hers. It was all so different from her world of corporate sharks and society sycophants. Her personal phone buzzed again. This one she had to answer. "I'm fine, Claire," she said before her sister could speak. "Are you? Because the board is talking conservatorship. They're painting you as having a breakdown." Sarah pressed her forehead against the cool window glass, watching Jack's truck pass by below. "I'm not having a breakdown. I'm having a revelation. Lizzie. Don't call me that. I'm Sarah here." "Fine, Sarah. While you're playing small-town business owner, everything Dad built is at risk. The Tokyo merger is a mistake. Chen Industries would gut our renewable energy division. It's not your call anymore. Not if you don't come back." Sarah watched Jack stop to help Mrs. Peterson collect scattered newspapers from her yard. Such a simple gesture, done without thought of reward or advantage. When was the last time she'd seen anything so genuine? "I'll handle it," Sarah promised. "Just give me time." "Time for what? To hide in some dusty Wyoming town? To pretend you're not who you are?" But that was just it. Who was she? Who? Elizabeth Sarah Blackwood had spent 15 years being what everyone needed. The perfect CEO, the gracious philanthropist, the dutiful daughter carrying on her father's legacy. Sarah Mitchell might be a fiction, but she felt more real than Elizabeth had in years. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said, and hung up before Claire could protest. A knock at her door made her jump. Hastily hiding both phones, she cleared her throat. "Yes? Sorry to disturb you, Ms. Mitchell." Jack's voice. "Found these repair estimates in my truck. Thought you might want to review them before tomorrow." Sarah quickly checked her reflection, mussed her hair slightly to maintain the casual image. When she opened the door, Jack was holding out a slightly crumpled paper, his expression businesslike but warm. "Thank you," she said, accepting it. Their fingers brushed, and she felt that same spark from earlier. In his eyes, She saw only Sarah. Mitchell, small business owner trying to restore a piece of local history. The simplicity of it made her ache. "See you in the morning," he said, and turned to leave. Sarah watched him descend the stairs, then looked down at the estimate. His prices were far too low for the quality of work he'd described. Another piece of his story clicked into place. He needed this job as much as she needed this escape. She returned to the window, watching him drive away. For the first time in her life, Elizabeth Sarah Blackwood, who could buy this entire town without denting her fortune, felt truly wealthy. She had something money couldn't buy, the chance to be seen for herself, not her net worth. The question was, how long could she keep the illusion alive? Morning light streamed through the saloon's broken windows as Jack pulled his grandfather's old toolbox from his truck. The wooden box, worn smooth by 3 generations of calloused hands, held more than just tools. It carried the weight of family history in every dent and scratch. Sarah was already inside, hair tied back, wearing work gloves that looked too new against the saloon's aged wood. She'd arranged coffee and fresh pastries on the bar, the gesture somehow both thoughtful and uncertain, like someone playing a role they hadn't quite settled into. "Hope you like coffee," she said, pushing a steaming mug his way. "I wasn't sure how you took it. Black is fine." Jack set his toolbox on the bar, the solid thunk of well-worn wood against wood echoing through the empty space. When he opened it, Sarah leaned in with genuine curiosity. "That box has seen some history," she observed. Jack ran his fingers along the inside lid, where dates and job notes had been penciled in his grandfather's precise hand. "Started with my grandfather in 52. He carved his initials here." He pointed to the faded TH in one corner. "Dad added his when he took over. And here's mine." Sarah traced the progression of initials with a gloved finger. 3 generations of craftsmanship. That's rare these days. Rarer by the minute in Crystal Creek. Jack pulled out a worn leather measuring tape. "Shall we get started?" They began with the windows, Jack teaching Sarah how to hold the pane steady while he measured for replacements. She was a quick study, asking intelligent questions about historical accuracy and energy efficiency. Her hands, despite their obvious lack of calluses, were steady and sure. "My father," she hesitated, then continued carefully, "he always said you can tell everything about a person by how they treat their tools." Jack glanced at her, catching something wistful in her expression. "Sounds like a wise man." He was. Sarah's voice carried a weight Jack recognized, the tone of someone speaking of the dead. As morning stretched into afternoon, they fell into an easy rhythm. Jack worked on the window frames, while Sarah sorted salvageable glass from debris, their conversation flowing naturally between tasks. "This piece here," Jack said, showing her a section of intricate woodwork. "That's what you don't see anymore. Hand-carved corner blocks, each one unique. My grandfather used to say every building has its own heartbeat." Sarah ran her fingers along the carved pattern. "And this one? What's its heartbeat telling you?" "That it's got fight left in it." Jack smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just needs someone to believe in it." Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of a shared understanding. They both knew what it meant to carry the weight of legacy. As Jack worked, he found himself sharing stories of the saloon's history, the secret panel behind the bar where Prohibition-era bottles still lurked, the corner table where his parents had their first date, the brass rail his father had restored, using techniques passed down from his grandfather. Sarah absorbed it all, her questions revealing a deep appreciation for the craftsmanship and history. But occasionally, when she thought he wasn't looking, he caught glimpses of something else in her expression, a loneliness that seemed at odds with her confident demeanor. By late afternoon, they'd made solid progress. The worst of the debris was cleared, and 2 windows were ready for new glass. Jack was packing up his tools when Sarah spoke again. "Your grandfather's toolbox, it's more than just tools, isn't it? It's like a family archive." Jack closed the lid gently. "Every scratch tells a story. Like this dent here." He pointed to a corner. Happened when Dad was teaching me to frame windows. I dropped a hammer and nearly broke my foot. He always said it was the best lesson in tool respect I ever got. Sarah laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. For a moment, she seemed to forget whatever weight she carried, whatever role she was playing. In that laugh, Jack heard something real, something that made him want to know more. As he loaded the toolbox back into his truck, Jack found himself looking forward to tomorrow in a way that had nothing to do with the paycheck he desperately needed. There was a mystery to Sarah Mitchell. But more than that, there was a genuineness that showed through when she forgot to guard it. What he couldn't know was that his honest day's work had affected Sarah just as deeply, stirring memories of a father who taught her about integrity before boardrooms and balance sheets took over her life. The Crystal Creek Gazette didn't usually catch Jack's eye, but the headline on Mrs. Peterson's front porch stopped him cold. America's wealthiest woman still missing. Below was a photo of Elizabeth Sarah Blackwood at some charity gala, looking regal in an evening gown. Jack barely glanced at it as he helped the elderly woman gather her scattered papers from the morning's delivery. Such a shame, Mrs. Peterson clucked, clutching the newspaper. Pretty young thing like that, running a multi-billion-dollar company. My grandson works for one of her subsidiaries in Denver. Says the whole company's in chaos. That's so? Jack kept his tone neutral, stacking the rest of her mail. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? She lowered her voice conspiratorially. About that new saloon owner. Shows up out of nowhere, pays cash, keeps to herself. Sarah Mitchell's just private, Mrs. Peterson. Nothing wrong with that. Did you know she ordered those new windows from Denver instead of Watson's Hardware? Paid triple for overnight delivery. Jack straightened, frowning. He hadn't known that. Come to think of it, all the supplies had appeared with remarkable speed, and Sarah never blinked at the costs. At the saloon later that morning, he found Sarah deep in conversation with a stranger in an expensive suit. Definitely not a local. She looked tense, her usual calm demeanor cracked. "Everything all right?" he called out, making his presence known. The man turned, assessing Jack with cold efficiency. "Private business matter, which is concluded," Sarah said firmly. "Thank you for stopping by, Mr. Chen." After the man left, Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she sorted invoices. Jack pretended not to notice. "Town's getting curious about you," he said casually, unpacking his tools. "Small towns usually are." Her voice was steady, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. "Folks wonder why someone would buy a broken-down saloon in the middle of nowhere. Pay. And cash. No questions asked." Sarah's shoulders tensed. "Are you wondering too, Mr. Harrison?" "Nope." He laid out his measuring tape, checking the window frames. "Figure everyone's got their reasons. Running to something or from something. Doesn't much matter if they're doing right by the town." She looked at him then, surprise and something like gratitude in her expression. "And you think I'm doing right by the town? You're restoring a piece of its history instead of tearing it down for some tourist trap. That counts for something." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, but Jack noticed Sarah growing increasingly distracted. She kept checking her phone, which would buzz with messages she'd quickly silence. Around noon, Betsy from the diner brought their lunch order. Her eyes darted around the saloon with barely concealed curiosity. "Quite a project you've taken on, Miss Mitchell," Betsy said. "Must have quite the successful background in restoration work." "Actually, this is my first project," Sarah replied smoothly. "I'm learning as I go. Thankfully, Mr. Harrison is an excellent teacher." "How fascinating," Betsy lingered. "You know, you remind me of someone—" "Betsy," Jack interrupted. "Think I saw Tom's truck pull up at the diner. Might want to check on that lunch rush." After Betsy left, Sarah's relief was palpable. "Thank you. Don't mention it." Jack unwrapped his sandwich, though you might want to be prepared for more of that. Small towns like a dog with a bone when they catch scent of a mystery. Sarah pushed her food around her plate. "And what if the mystery isn't what they think? What if it's worse?" Jack set down his sandwich, studying her carefully. "Worse than being a secret millionaire?" She flinched almost imperceptibly. Just a hypothetical. Well, hypothetically, he said, choosing his words with care. I'd say everyone's got a right to their secrets, long as they're not hurting anyone. And hypothetically, if someone came to Crystal Creek looking for a fresh start, they'd probably find most folks here pretty understanding. Once they got past the gossip stage, Sarah's eyes met his, searching for something. Whatever she found made her relax slightly. You're an unusual man, Jack Harrison. Nothing unusual about common decency. He returned to his sandwich. Now, about that crown molding we need to match. The rest of the day passed quietly, but Jack noticed Sarah seemed more at ease. If she was running from something, he realized, he was okay with not knowing what. Some things were better left unsaid, at least for now. Night had settled over Crystal Creek when Sarah realized she wasn't alone in the saloon. A light flickered from the back office, Jack's makeshift workspace during the renovation. She'd given him a key last week, trusting him to lock up when he worked late. Still, something in the quality of the silence drew her downstairs. She found him hunched over the old desk, surrounded by papers. A leather-bound ledger lay open before him, its pages dense with columns of red ink. His fingers traced each line with the same care he showed the saloon's woodwork, but his expression was heavy with worry. He didn't notice her at first, too absorbed in his calculations. The desk lamp cast harsh shadows across his face. Aging. Him. A half-empty whiskey glass sat untouched by his elbow. "Working late?" she asked softly. Jack startled, instinctively moving to cover the ledger. "Sarah, didn't think anyone was around." "Neither did I." She stepped closer, catching glimpses of numbers that made her heart sink. After 15 years running Blackwood Industries, she could read financial distress at a glance. "Everything." "Okay," he gave a hollow laugh. "Just trying to make numbers add up that don't want to." His guard was down, exhaustion and whiskey loosening his usual reserve. "You ever feel like you're fighting a losing battle?" Sarah's throat tightened. Every figure in that ledger was a nail in the coffin of his family's legacy. The ranch was drowning in debt, and the saloon work, while helping, was a drop in an ocean of red ink. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "battles look unwinnable because we're fighting them alone. This ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. Jack's voice was rough. "My grandfather built it from nothing. Dad modernized it, kept it competitive, and I'm the one who's going to lose it." Sarah's fingers itched to reach for her phone, to make a single call that would erase those numbers. She had more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. One small wire transfer, and Jack's problems would vanish. But she knew it would destroy something far more valuable than money could buy. "Show me," she said instead, pulling up a chair. He hesitated, pride warring with desperation. Finally, he turned the ledger toward her. Sarah studied the pages, her mind automatically finding patterns, possibilities. "Your operational costs are actually quite reasonable," she observed. "It's the debt service that's killing you. These interest rates are predatory." Jack looked at her sharply. "You know something about ranch finances?" "I had a father who believed in teaching his daughter about business. It wasn't even a lie. Have you considered refinancing? Every bank in 3 counties knows the Harrison Ranch is a risk. Nobody's touching it." He rubbed his eyes. "I've got maybe 3 months before foreclosure, unless cattle prices miracle their way up or I win the lottery." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. She could create a shell company, offer a private loan at reasonable rates, or buy the bank's note through an intermediary. Or, what about partnerships? She suggested. "The saloon will need reliable meat suppliers once we're up and running. Some sort of preferred vendor arrangement." Jack straightened slightly, professional pride replacing despair. "We raise some of the best beef in Wyoming. Dad's breeding program—" "Show me the numbers." Sarah pulled the ledger closer. "If we're going to be in business together, I should understand your operation." They spent the next 2 hours working through possibilities. Sarah was careful to ask questions instead of offering solutions, letting Jack's natural business sense find its way to opportunities. By midnight, they had the outline of a plan. Not a miracle, but a fighting chance. Thank you, Jack said quietly as they packed up. Not many people would take the time. Sarah watched him gather the papers, struck by the quiet dignity he maintained. Even in crisis, in her world, fortunes were made and lost on paper, pieces in a grand game. Here, every number represented something real. Acres walked by generations, cattle bred with care and pride, a legacy built by human hands. Jack? She caught him at the door. Don't give up yet. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. He smiled, tired but genuine, like a mysterious woman who knows suspiciously much about business finance. Something like that. She returned his smile, heart aching with the weight of her secret. After he left, Sarah sat alone in the darkened saloon. She had the power to solve his problems with a single phone call. But would it be help or interference, salvation or invasion? In her world, money solved everything. Here, she was learning, it could also destroy the very things that made life worth living. She touched the ledger, its worn pages containing so much more than numbers. Tomorrow, she would find a way to help that preserved his dignity. Tonight, she simply wished she could be as honest with him as he had been with her. The old jukebox crackled to life, its neon lights painting the saloon in soft blues and pinks. Sarah stood back, watching with quiet satisfaction as Crystal Creek's residents filtered into the partially renovated space. It had been Jack's idea. A community gathering to celebrate the saloon's progress and keep local traditions alive. Been a while since anyone's seen the old girl looking this good, May Henderson said, running her hand along the freshly polished bar. You and Jack have worked miracles. Sarah tried to ignore the warmth that spread through her at the casual linking of their names. Jack did the real work. I just handed him nails. Honey, I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. May's knowing look made Sarah nervous. Never seen him look at someone handing him nails quite the way he looks at you. Before Sarah could respond, the jukebox switched songs. George Strait's I Cross My Heart filled the room, and couples gravitated to the cleared space in front of the bar. Sarah watched them, struck by the simple intimacy of time-worn partnerships, moving in familiar rhythms. Ma'am? Jack's voice behind her. She turned to find him holding out his hand, a shy half-smile playing at his lips. Think we ought to make sure that floor is steady enough for dancing. Sarah hesitated. I'm not sure I know how to. Just follow my lead. His calloused hand enclosed hers, warm and sure. That's one thing us cowboys know how to do. He drew her into the center of the floor, one hand settling respectfully at her waist. Sarah forced herself to breathe normally, to remember she was Sarah Mitchell, small-town business owner, not Elizabeth Blackwood, who'd learned ballroom dancing at Swiss finishing schools. The wood creaked beneath their feet as Jack guided her in a simple two-step. See? Nothing to it. The floor seems pretty sturdy, she managed, hyper-aware of his proximity. Should be. These boards have seen 100 years of Saturday nights. His eyes crinkled with amusement, though probably not many owners who look quite as nervous as you do. I'm not nervous, but she was. Not of the dancing, of how right this felt, of how easy it would be to let herself fall into this moment. This life, this man. No? He twirled her gently, then pulled her a fraction closer. Could have fooled me. The song changed. Slower now. Around them other couples adjusted their pace, but Jack kept their steady rhythm. In the soft light, with sawdust still sparkling. In his dark hair, he looked like something out of an old movie, the kind where the cowboy always had honest eyes and a true heart. You've got that look again, he said softly. What look? Like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. You can set it down sometimes, you know, even if just for one dance. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. When was the last time anyone had seen through her masks so easily, had cared enough to notice? The jukebox skipped slightly, a reminder of age and imperfection. Like everything in Crystal Creek, it was worn but treasured, valued for its history, rather than its polish. Like the saloon itself, like Jack's ranch, like all the things Sarah was learning to see with new eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For this. For—" She gestured vaguely at the room, the dancing couples, the warmly lit bar. "For showing me what it means to belong somewhere." His eyes searched hers, and for a moment, Sarah thought, he might kiss her. Instead, he pulled her closer, letting her rest her head against his shoulder as they swayed. It was more intimate than a kiss, this quiet acceptance of whatever mysteries she carried. The song ended, but they kept dancing. Sarah closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of sawdust and leather and honest work. For these few precious minutes, she wasn't the missing CEO or the saloon's mysterious owner. She was just a woman dancing, with a man who made her feel like coming home. Later, she would remember this as the moment she realized she was in trouble. Because no matter how this ended, when her true identity came to light, when her carefully constructed world collapsed, she would never forget how it felt to dance with Jack Harrison on a century-old floor, both of them suspended between what was and what could be. The business magazine lay forgotten on a corner table, left behind by a traveling salesman. Sarah might never have noticed it if Jack hadn't picked it up during their lunch break. Her own face stared back from the cover, or rather Elizabeth Blackwood's face, photographed at last year's Silicon Valley Summit. America's most eligible. CEO, the woman behind the Blackwood billions. "Interesting article," Jack said, flipping through the pages. "Says here she disappeared 3 months ago. No one knows where she went." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she sorted receipts. Maybe she needed a break. Running from responsibilities, more likely. The judgment in his voice stung. "Says she was about to face a crucial board vote on selling their renewable energy division. Instead of staying to fight, she vanished." Perhaps there's more to the story. Sarah couldn't help herself. Maybe she had good reasons. Jack glanced, up catching something in her tone, but before he could respond, the saloon's door chimed. "I'm telling you, it's her." A man's voice, cultured and familiar. Sarah's blood ran cold. Stanley Seba, one of her board members. The wire transfers were traced to this town. Sarah moved instinctively behind the bar as Jack rose to greet the visitors. Through the liquor, bottles, she watched Stanley and another man in an expensive suit survey the renovation work. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Jack's voice was pleasant, but carrying an edge of protectiveness that made Sarah's heart clench. "Looking for someone," Stanley said, pulling out his phone. "Elizabeth Blackwood. Have you seen this woman?" Jack studied the photo, his face unreadable. "Can't say that I have. What's your interest?" "Board business. Miss Blackwood has obligations she's neglecting." Stanley's eyes swept the room. "We have reason to believe she's in this area. Small town like Crystal Creek?" Jack chuckled. "Think we'd notice a billionaire in our midst." Sarah held her breath, pressing herself against the back wall. A bottle clinked softly, and Stanley turned toward the sound. "Mind if we look around?" "Actually, I do mind." Jack's tone hardened. "We're closed for renovations. Private property. Now see here. Have a nice day, gentlemen." Jack moved to the door, his body language leaving no room for argument. After they left, Sarah emerged slowly from behind the bar. Jack stood at the window, watching until the men's luxury rental car disappeared down Main Street. "Thank you," she whispered. He turned, and the look in his eyes made her stomach drop. "Want to tell me what that was about?" "Jack, because I'm starting to think Mrs. Peterson's gossip isn't so far-fetched." He picked up the magazine again, studying the cover photo. "You know, you look a lot like her." If someone wasn't really looking, Sarah's mind raced. She could lie, make up a story about an unfortunate resemblance. But standing there, seeing the hurt beginning to form in his eyes, she couldn't bring herself to add another deception. "I can explain. Can you?" His voice was quiet. "Because I'm wondering if anything you've told me is true. The way I feel about this place is true." She stepped toward him. "The way I feel about—" She stopped, unable to finish. Jack's jaw tightened. "Those men, they'll be back. Probably." He nodded slowly, then turned back to his tools. You should be careful. Next time I might not be around to run interference. The dismissal in his voice was worse than anger. Sarah watched him return to work, his movements precise but tense. The distance between them had suddenly grown vast, filled with unspoken questions and accusations. She retreated to her office, closing the door softly. Her burner phone showed 5 missed calls from Stanley. Soon, she knew, her carefully constructed sanctuary would crumble. But for now, all she could think about was the look in Jack's eyes, the first crack in the trust they'd built. Downstairs, she heard the rhythmic sound of his hammer, steady and sure despite everything. She wondered if he was thinking about their dance, about all the moments that had felt so real. They had been real. She wanted to tell him, just because a person is hiding doesn't mean their heart isn't true. The call came at dawn. Sarah heard Jack's truck roar past the saloon before May's frantic voice reached her through the phone. The creek's breached. Half the herd's trapped on the wrong side. We need hands. Sarah was in her jeep before she could think better of it. The sun was just breaking over the horizon as she pulled onto the ranch's access road, tires slipping in mud from the night's unexpected rainfall. She found chaos at the lower pasture. Cowboys on horseback struggling to control panicked cattle, the creek a roaring monster that had jumped its banks. Jack sat astride his horse at the center of it all, shouting directions. He spotted her jeep and rode over, his expression a mix of surprise and something else she couldn't read. You shouldn't be here, he called over the noise. I can help. She was already pulling on boots she'd bought for show, but never really used. Just tell me what to do. He hesitated only a moment. Can you ride? Sarah thought of childhood summers at her family's Kentucky estate. Yes, May. He waved his ranch hand over. Get her on Duchess. We need every hand we can get. Minutes. Later, Sarah was mounted on a steady mare, trying to remember everything she'd learned about cattle handling from her surreptitious research into Jack's world. The creek had carved a new channel, trapping 30 head of valuable breeding stock on a rapidly shrinking island of high ground. Water's still rising, May reported grimly. Bridge is out upstream, only crossing points the old ford, but it's running high. Jack's face was drawn. Sarah knew what those cattle meant. Not just money, but the heart of his breeding program. The future he was fighting to save. We can't wait for it to go down, he decided. We'll have to try the ford. Getting dark soon, and those cattle are our best bloodline. Sarah studied the rushing water, remembering topographical maps she'd reviewed during the saloon's purchase. There's a natural bottleneck 200 yards downstream. The banks narrow there. Jack looked at her sharply. How do you know that? I did some research on local geography. When I bought the saloon, the lie felt bitter now. If we could guide them there, the current would be slower. He considered her words, then nodded slowly. May, take 3 riders upstream, make noise, herd them down toward the narrows. Sarah, stay with me. They worked as the sun climbed higher. Sarah following Jack's lead as they maneuvered the frightened cattle. Her thighs ached, unaccustomed to hours in the saddle, but she refused to show weakness. Not now. At the narrowing, Jack raised his hand for everyone to hold position. The cattle, sensing opportunity, began to move toward the water. Sarah held her breath as the first cow stepped in, then another. Suddenly, a young heifer panicked, turning back and threatening to scatter the herd. Without thinking, Sarah spurred Duchess forward, cutting off its escape route. The move brought her to the water's edge, where the bank was rapidly eroding. Sarah! Jack's warning came too late. The bank gave way. Sarah felt Duchess stumble, then lunge forward. For a heart-stopping moment, they were in the rushing water. Then strong hands grabbed her reins, and Jack was there, hauling them both to safety as the cattle, spooked into action, thundered across the ford behind them. They ended up on the safe side of the creek, Sarah soaked and shaking, Jack's hands still gripping her arms. The cattle, miraculously, had all made it across. That, he said roughly, was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. I couldn't let them scatter. Sarah pushed wet hair from her face. Not when I knew what they meant to you. His expression softened, then hardened again. Like those men yesterday? The ones looking for Elizabeth Blackwood. What do they mean? To you? Sarah met his eyes, seeing hurt and confusion warring with something deeper. Not as much as this place. These people, she swallowed hard. You, for a long moment, they stayed there, the truth hovering between them, unspoken. Then May rode up, with a whoop of triumph, breaking the spell. We did it! Every last one made it across. She beamed at Sarah, not bad for a city girl. Jack stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place. Get everyone in for coffee and dry clothes. We've got fences to mend once the water goes down. Sarah watched him ride ahead, his shoulders set with familiar determination. She'd helped save his cattle, but in doing so, she'd revealed more of herself than she'd intended. Knowledge about the creek's geography, skills she shouldn't have. Each piece of her carefully constructed facade was cracking, and she didn't know how much longer she could hold it together. As she followed the others back to the ranch house, Sarah realized that saving the herd might have cost her something far more precious. The fragile trust she and Jack had built, as vulnerable now as that eroded riverbank. The viral post appeared on Crystal Creek's community Facebook page at 8:47 a.m., a side-by-side comparison of Sarah Mitchell at last week's dance and Elizabeth Blackwood at a charity gala. The caption read, "Anyone else notice our mysterious new saloon owner is actually America's wealthiest woman?" Sarah was in the middle of reviewing renovation plans with Jack when phones started buzzing throughout the saloon. She knew the moment. It happened, saw the change sweep across his face as he read his screen, watched the color drain from his features. "Jack," she started. "Is it true?" His voice was deadly quiet. A crowd was gathering outside the saloon's windows. Through the glass, she could see people pointing, phones raised. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time. "Let me explain. Just answer the question." His hands were flat on the bar, knuckles white. "Are you Elizabeth Blackwood?" Sarah straightened, feeling her carefully maintained facade crumbling. "Yes." The single word seemed to echo through the saloon. Jack pushed away from the bar, running a hand through his hair. All this time, every conversation, every moment, it was all a lie? "No!" The desperation in her voice surprised them. Both. The saloon, the restoration, getting to know you, that was all real. "Real?" He gave a harsh laugh. "You're worth billions. You could buy this whole town without blinking. Yet you let me worry about the cost of lumber. Watched me agonize over my ranch's finances. I wanted to help." "Help?" His eyes flashed. "By lying. By playing some kind of billionaire's game of dress-up while real people's livelihoods hung in the balance." Through the windows, Sarah could see news vans pulling up. Her phone was vibrating constantly now. Her sister, her board, the press. "I came here to escape," she said quietly. "To find something genuine in a world where everything I touch turns into a transaction. And then I met you, and for the first time in my life someone saw me. Not my money, not my name, just me." "I saw Sarah Mitchell," Jack corrected. "A woman who supposedly shared my values, who understood what it meant to work with your hands, to build something real." He gestured to the saloon around them. "Was any of it true, or was this all just an elaborate hobby for you?" Before Sarah could answer, the saloon's door burst open. Camera flashes exploded around them as reporters pushed their way in. "Miss Blackwood, is it true you've been hiding in Wyoming?" "Elizabeth, what about the Chen Industries merger? Are the rumors of a mental breakdown accurate?" Jack moved instinctively, placing himself between Sarah and the cameras. Even now, even hurt and angry, his protective instincts kicked in. The gesture nearly broke her. "No comment," she said, her CEO voice sliding into place like armor. "Please respect the privacy of this establishment and its employees." "Employees!" A reporter zeroed in on Jack. "Sir, how does it feel to learn you've been working for America's wealthiest woman?" Sarah saw Jack's shoulders stiffen, saw the proud rancher being reduced to a soundbite, a human interest angle on her story. In that moment, she realized she'd done exactly what she'd been running from, turned something genuine into another media circus. "Get out!" Jack's voice cut through the chaos. "All of you, this is private property," the authority in his tone. It worked. The reporters retreated, though they remained pressed against the windows, cameras rolling. In the sudden quiet, Sarah and Jack stood facing each other across the bar where they'd shared so many conversations, where just days ago they'd nearly kissed. "Jack, please, I think you should go." He wouldn't look at her. "Your real life is calling." Outside, more media vehicles were arriving. Sarah's phone showed 47 missed calls. Her carefully constructed haven was shattering, and with it the most real thing she'd ever known. "What I feel for you," she whispered. "That's not a lie." He finally met her eyes, and the pain she saw there was worse than anger. "The problem is, Miss Blackwood, I don't think you know the difference anymore." Sarah grabbed her purse with trembling hands, dignity the only shield she had left. As she walked toward the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, these past weeks have been the most real my life has ever felt." She stepped out into the flashbulbs and shouted questions, leaving behind the one person who had seen her for herself and would probably never trust her again. The saloon felt hollow without her. Jack stood amid the half-finished renovations, each incomplete project, a reminder of promises now hanging in limbo. The morning's newspapers lay scattered across the bar, their headlines screaming about Elizabeth, Blackwood's rural hideaway and cowboy connection. He'd sent the crew home, needing space to think, but the silence only amplified the memories. Her laugh echoing off the old walls, the way she'd hand him tools before he asked. Those quiet moments when she'd traced the bar's ancient initials and seemed so genuinely moved by their history. Had any of it been real? His phone buzzed again, another reporter seeking comment. He'd stopped counting after the 20th call. May had started screening visitors to the ranch, turning away the more persistent journalists who thought they'd found a human interest angle in the cowboy who'd captured the heart of America's wealthiest woman. The truth was far simpler and far more painful. He'd fallen for a ghost, a character in a play he hadn't known was being performed. The back door opened quietly. "Thought I'd find you here." May entered carrying a familiar brown paper bag. "Brought you dinner, since you're apparently planning to brood in the dark all night." "I'm working," Jack protested, though his tools lay untouched. "Sure you are?" May set the bag down, then surveyed the saloon. "Place feels different now. Everything feels different now. Because you know she's rich?" May's directness had always been her strength. "Or because she didn't tell you?" Jackie ran a hand along the bar's smooth surface. Wood he'd restored while Sarah watched, asked questions, seemed to care. "You know what my dad used to say about trust? That it's like good lumber. Takes time to season, splits easy if you're not careful." She had so many chances to tell me the truth. The words felt bitter in his mouth. Every time I opened up. About the ranch's troubles, about my fears of losing it all. She just sat there knowing she could solve everything with a phone call. "Maybe that's why she didn't tell you." May's voice was gentle. Maybe she wanted to be seen as something other than a walking bank account. Jack thought of Sarah's face when they danced, the unguarded joy he'd glimpsed there. The way she'd thrown herself into physical labor, learning to use tools with determination, if not skill. Had that all been method acting or something more? Found this in the office. May pulled out a leather-bound notebook. Sarah's planning. Journal. Might want to look at the last few pages before you make up your mind about what was real. She left him alone with the journal. Jack stared at it for a long time before opening to the final entries. Sarah's elegant handwriting filled the pages. But these weren't renovation notes. They were plans for saving his ranch, detailed financial strategies, market analyses, ideas for modernization that preserved the ranch's character while making it sustainable. The last page held a single paragraph. I know I can never tell him about these plans now. Any offer of help would feel like charity, like proof that I see him as a project rather than a person. But watching him fight for his legacy while I sit on resources that could save it is the hardest thing I've ever done. Sometimes doing the right thing means watching someone you care about struggle, even when you could make it all go away. I'm learning that true respect means honoring someone's pride as much as their dreams. Jack closed the journal, his anger warring with a deeper understanding. In trying to protect his pride, had she actually shown him more respect than a simple financial rescue would have? Outside, reporters' cars still lined Main Street. Inside, the saloon held the echoes of genuine laughter, honest work, and conversations that had felt more real than anything in his life lately. Somewhere between those two worlds lay the truth about Sarah Mitchell, or Elizabeth Blackwood, and what they'd built together. The question was whether that truth was worth fighting for. Sarah sat in her hotel suite in Cheyenne, surrounded by lawyers and board members, feeling more trapped with each passing minute. The takeover documents lay spread across the conference table like a battle plan. The Chen Industries merger cannot wait any longer, Stanley Weber insisted, jabbing his finger at the papers. Your little vacation has already cost the shareholders millions. It would cost them more than money. Sarah's voice was steel. Chen would dismantle our renewable energy division. 3,000 jobs gone. 20 years of research scrapped. That's business. Another board member chimed in. We have a responsibility to maximize profits. Sarah thought of Jack's face when he'd talked about his family legacy, about responsibility meaning more than bottom lines. And what about our responsibility to the communities we serve? Her phone buzzed. May Henderson's name flashed on the screen. The third call today. Sarah forced herself to ignore it, though her heart clenched. Speaking of communities, Stanley's smile was shark-like. We've found a solution to your rural distraction. Chen Industries has expressed interest in acquiring significant property in Crystal Creek, including a certain struggling ranch. Sarah's blood ran cold. You wouldn't. We would. The town's perfect for their new corporate retreat center. And that saloon you're so fond of? It would make a charming gift shop. Through the hotel window, Sarah could see the mountains in the distance, the same mountains that framed Crystal Creek, that had watched over generations of ranchers and dreamers. That had given her a glimpse of a life where worth wasn't measured in dollar signs. Her sister Claire burst into the room, waving her tablet. Have you seen this? The Crystal Creek Gazette is running an editorial about corporate vultures circling their town. They're organizing some kind of community resistance. Sarah's heart leaped. On Claire's tablet, she caught a glimpse of familiar faces. May, Mrs. Peterson, even Betsy from the diner. And there, in the background of one photo, Jack. His expression was grim but determined. Let them resist, Stanley scoffed. Every property has its price. Not this one. Sarah stood, sudden clarity washing over her. I'm calling an emergency shareholder meeting. Full board attendance required. Elizabeth, that's Miss Blackwood to you, Stanley. And while you're checking our corporate charter, pay special attention to the clauses about ethical investment and community impact. My father wrote those personally. The room erupted in protests, but Sarah was already moving. In the hall, Claire caught up with her. What are you doing? The Chen merger is worth billions. Some things are worth more. Sarah's fingers flew over her phone, sending messages, making calls. Remember what Dad used to say, money can buy anything except a community's soul. That's why he died nearly bankrupt, Claire snapped. No, that's why people still speak his name with respect. Sarah paused, turning to her sister. I've spent 3 weeks in Crystal Creek, Claire. I've seen what real wealth looks like. It's not in our stock portfolio. They'll try to force you out. The board can't. Dad made sure of that. As long as one Blackwood holds voting shares, they can't override us on matters of corporate. Values. Sarah's smile was fierce. And I just happen to have a proposal that would make Dad proud. Her phone buzzed again. May. This time, Sarah answered. They're offering to buy everyone out. May's voice was tight with worry. Corporate men in suits going door to door. Some folks are scared, talking about selling. Tell them to wait. Sarah's mind was racing, pieces falling into place. Tell them Elizabeth Blackwood has a different offer, one that will keep Crystal Creek's soul intact. She ended the call, already planning her next move. The board wanted profits. She'd show them how profitable ethical investment could be. They wanted development. She'd show them how to grow without destroying what made a place special. But first, she had to face the town, face Jack, and hope that somewhere between the lies and truth they'd understand she'd finally found something worth fighting for, not just their land, but their way of life. Claire watched her sister transform from Sarah Mitchell back into Elizabeth Blackwood, but somehow different from before. You're really going to risk everything for this town? No, Sarah replied softly. I'm going to risk everything for what it taught me, about what really matters. The Blackwood Industries boardroom fell silent as Sarah spread two documents on the polished table. One was her counter-proposal to the Chen merger. The other was a photo of the Lucky Spur's ancient bar, its surface bearing a century of carved initials. Gentlemen, she said, every inch Elizabeth Blackwood now, but with Sarah Mitchell's hard-earned wisdom in her voice, let me tell you about real value. Meanwhile, in Crystal Creek, Jack stood before a crowd gathered in the saloon. News of the corporate buyout offers had spread like wildfire, and frightened townspeople packed the building where he and Sarah had once danced. They're offering 3 times market value, Tom Wilson was saying. How can we turn that down? Jack traced his fingers along the bar's smooth wood, remembering Sarah's words about legacy and worth. Because some things aren't for sale. Back in New York, Sarah faced her board. Our renewable energy division isn't just about profit margins, it's about the future. Crystal Creek showed me what that future could look like. Community-based development that preserves what matters while building something new. Pretty words, Stanley sneered. But the numbers... The numbers? Sarah clicked her presentation to life. Let me show you the real numbers. Not quarterly profits, but generational impact. Not stock prices, but sustainable growth. In the saloon, Jack unfolded Sarah's journal. Before she left, Sarah, Miss Blackwood, drew up plans, not to buy us out, but to help us thrive. Rural solar initiatives, artisanal beef programs, tourism that celebrates our heritage instead of replacing it. And we're supposed to trust her, someone called out, after she lied to all of us. Jack thought of Sarah's face when she'd first seen the saloon, her genuine awe at its history. She lied about her name, but everything else, her respect for this place, her vision for its future, that was real. In the boardroom, Sarah's presentation reached its conclusion. By partnering with communities like Crystal Creek instead of consuming them, we can create sustainable profit centers that benefit everyone. The Chen merger offers quick profits. My proposal offers lasting growth. The shareholders, Stanley began. We'll see better returns within 5 years, Sarah cut him off. And unlike Chen's slash-and-burn approach, our reputation and community relationships will remain intact. Her phone buzzed. A text from May. Jack's rallying the town. But we need you here. Sarah looked up at her board, at the men who'd thought they could bully her into betraying everything her father had built. Gentlemen, you have a choice. Follow my lead into a sustainable future, or fight me and watch your stock options tank when I take this public. You wouldn't dare. Try me. She smiled, thinking of Jack's quiet strength. I've learned a few things about standing my ground. The saloon had grown quiet as Jack finished reading from Sarah's journal. She saw what we could be. Not a corporate retreat, but a living community. And she chose to fight for that vision instead of just buying us out. But can we trust her? Mrs. Peterson asked softly. I don't know, Jack admitted, but I trust what she showed us about ourselves, about what we're worth. His phone lit up with a message. He read it, then looked up at his neighbors. She's on her way. The board meeting just ended. Back in her private jet, Sarah studied 2 plane tickets on her lap. One would take her back to New York, to the safe, familiar world of corporate power. The other would return her to Crystal Creek, to uncertainty and hard-earned trust. The choice was no choice at all. Jack stood at the saloon window as dusk approached, watching headlights appear on the horizon. Behind him, the townspeople waited, their futures hanging in balance. He thought of his own legacy, of generations of Harrisons who'd chosen this land, over easier paths. Sarah's car pulled up outside. Through the window, their eyes met. In that moment, they both recognized something in each other. The weight of choice, the courage of conviction, the understanding that some things were worth more than money could measure. She stepped out of the car, not as Elizabeth Blackwood, corporate titan, or Sarah Mitchell, small-town owner, but as herself, a woman who'd found her true worth in a place she'd never expected. The saloon's door opened. Sarah walked in, heady, ready to face whatever came next, and Jack, despite everything, felt his heart lift at the sight of her. Because whatever truth lay between her 2 names, he'd finally seen her real self in her choices. Now they just had to see if that was enough. Sarah stood before the gathered townspeople, acutely aware of Jack's presence by the bar. The familiar. Space felt different now, heavy with expectation, thick with unspoken questions. But for the first time since her identity was revealed, she felt completely herself. "I owe you all an apology," she began. "Not just for hiding who I was, but for underestimating who you are. I came to Crystal Creek looking for an escape. What I found was a home." She unrolled a set of plans on the bar. Not corporate takeover, documents, but something entirely new. "This is my proposal, not a buyout, but a partnership. Blackwood Industries will establish a rural development initiative with Crystal Creek as its pilot program. Every project will be community-led, focused on preserving what makes this place special while creating sustainable growth." Jack stepped forward, studying the plans. His expression remained carefully neutral, but she saw his eyes widen at certain details. "The ranch-to-table program," he said quietly. "This is what you were working on in your journal." Sarah nodded. Local ranches would supply premium beef to high-end restaurants across the country. Combined with solar initiatives to reduce operating costs, it could make family ranching profitable again. "But," she emphasized, looking around the room, "only if that's what the community wants. And if we don't want it," Tom Wilson challenged, "if we tell you to take your fancy plans and leave, then I leave. The saloon stays in local hands, funded by a blind trust. No strings, no corporate involvement." Sarah met Jack's eyes. "Some things shouldn't be for sale." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mrs. Peterson raised her hand. "And what about you, dear?" Where does Sarah Mitchell end and Elizabeth Blackwood begin? It was the question Sarah had been asking herself for weeks. "I'm both," she said simply. "Sarah Mitchell taught me who I could be when stripped of everything but myself. Elizabeth Blackwood has the resources to help this town. Together, maybe, they can build something worthwhile. With our help," Jack added quietly. It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was a start. The town meeting lasted hours. Questions were asked, concerns raised, arguments made. Sarah answered everything honestly, no longer hiding behind any facade. When asked about her feelings for Jack, she looked him in the eye and said simply, "They're real. But trust has to be rebuilt. I'm willing to try if he is." Finally, as midnight approached, the town reached a consensus. They would accept the partnership, but with conditions. A local council would have veto power over all developments. Profits would be reinvested in the community, and most importantly, the town's character would be preserved at all costs. As the crowd dispersed, Jack remained. Sarah watched him run, his hands along the bar's aged wood, a gesture she'd seen 100 times, but now understood differently. "You could have just bought the ranch," he said finally. solved everything with money. Why didn't you? Because you taught me the difference between price and value. She stepped closer. Everything real in my life has happened in this saloon. I couldn't bear to lose that. And us? His voice was rough. Was that real? The realest thing I've ever known. Sarah touched the bar beside his hand, not quite touching him. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to prove that Sarah Mitchell wasn't a lie. She was the truth I'd never been brave enough to live. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carving tool. You know the tradition about this bar? Every owner adds their initials. I remember. He held out the tool. Which name will you use? Sarah took it, understanding the weight of the question. Carefully, she carved SMEB with the current date. Both names, she explained, because I'm done hiding either part of myself. Jack studied the carving, then met her eyes. It won't. Be easy. The town's trust, my trust. It'll take time. I know. She set the tool down. But I've learned something about time from this place. The best things, trust, legacy, love, they can't be bought. They have to be built, moment by moment, choice by choice. Like restoring an old saloon, or saving a family ranch, she smiled cautiously, or finding out who you really are. Jack's hand covered hers on the bar, rough calluses against smooth skin. Not quite an embrace, not quite forgiveness, but something new beginning. Welcome home, he said softly. Sarah Elizabeth. The town council meeting was held in the newly restored Lucky Spur, its ancient walls now witnessing a different kind of history. Where corporate takeover threats had loomed just weeks ago, hope now filled the air along with the scent of fresh varnish and new wood. Mayor Thompson stood at the bar, reading from the partnership agreement. And with the signing of these documents, the Crystal Creek Heritage Development Initiative officially begins. He looked up at Sarah and Jack, standing side by side. Never thought I'd say this, but sometimes the best things come from unexpected places. Sarah felt Jack's hand brush against hers, a touch so slight it might have been accidental. They'd been working together over the past weeks, carefully rebuilding trust through actions rather than words. Every decision had been made jointly, every plan scrutinized by both the town council and ranch owners. The first solar installations begin next month, Sarah reported. We're prioritizing the working ranches, cutting their operating costs by 60%. The savings will help fund the Heritage Beef Program, which already has contracts with restaurants in Denver and Seattle, Jack added. His voice carried the quiet pride she'd first fallen in love with. Using the old ranching methods, but with modern marketing, best of both worlds. Tom Wilson, who'd once advocated selling to the developers, raised his hand. And the tourism aspects, we don't want to become some theme park version of ourselves. That's why the council has final say, Sarah assured him. We're focusing on authentic experiences, working ranch stays, traditional crafts, genuine Western heritage. No gift shops, no manufactured nostalgia. May Henderson, newly appointed to the Heritage Committee, stood up. Tell them about the apprenticeship program. Sarah smiled, glancing at Jack. This was his favorite part of the plan. We're partnering with the State University to create a Western trades program. Young people learning traditional ranching, sustainable land management, historical restoration, all while earning college credits. Keeping the old ways alive, Jack explained, by teaching them to the next generation. The meeting continued, but Sarah found herself watching the townspeople's faces. Where there had been fear and suspicion, she now saw cautious optimism. They were building something unique, not just preserving the past, but giving it a future. After the formal business concluded, people lingered at the bar. Mrs. Peterson ran her fingers over Sarah's carved initials, both sets of them. You know, dear, when we first found out who you were, I thought we'd lost something precious. Our independence, maybe, but you've given us something better, a way to keep being who we are. You did that yourselves, Sarah replied, by being strong enough to trust again, even after I deceived you. Oh, honey, Mrs. Peterson patted her hand. Sometimes the best truth comes after a lie, when we finally figure out who we really are. Later, as the crowd thinned, Jack found Sarah studying the old photographs they'd hung on the walls, images of Crystal Creek through the decades, each showing the town changing while remaining essentially itself. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Just thinking about masks," she said, "how sometimes we wear them so long we forget who we are underneath. Until something or someone helps us remember." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. "A key. Found this in my dad's old desk. It's to the ranch house." He placed it in her palm. "Thought, maybe you could use it for when you're tired of being Elizabeth Blackwood and need to remember Sarah Mitchell." Sarah closed her fingers around the key, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering. Not just access to his home, but to the person she'd become there. "Both names," she reminded him softly. "Both names," he agreed. "Both real." Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting Crystal Creek in shades of promise. Inside, surrounded by the warmth of acceptance and the possibility of love renewed, Sarah finally felt her two worlds merging into something genuine and lasting, like initials carved in ancient wood, marking not just ownership but belonging. Autumn painted Crystal Creek in golds and reds as Sarah walked the boundary of the Harrison Ranch with Jack, clipboard in hand. The first solar arrays gleamed in the distance, while cattle grazed peacefully beneath them, a perfect blend of old and new that symbolized everything they'd been working toward. "The grazing patterns have actually improved," Jack explained, pride evident in his voice. "The panels provide shade, which helps the grass stay green longer. Who would have thought?" Sarah made notes, but her attention was drawn to how naturally Jack now moved between rancher and businessman. In the 3 months since the partnership began, he'd revealed a talent for innovation that surprised everyone except her: the heritage. "Beef program is exceeding projections," she said. 3 more restaurants in San Francisco want contracts. We'll need to coordinate with the other ranches to meet demand. Already scheduled a meeting at the Saloon tomorrow. Tom Wilson's bringing his son back from college to learn the operation." Jack grinned. "Seems your apprenticeship program is bringing the kids home instead of driving them away." They crested a hill, and Sarah caught her breath. The valley spread below them, Crystal Creek nestled against the mountains like a jewel in a natural setting. The town had come alive in recent months, not with corporate development, but with organic growth. The Saloon hosted weekly community dinners, where ranchers and visiting chefs planned menus. The old mercantile was becoming a heritage crafts center. Even the empty storefront next to the bank was being renovated into a rural business incubator. "Sometimes I can't believe how much has changed," she mused, "and how much hasn't." Jack studied her profile. "Having second thoughts?" "No." She turned to face him. "The board meeting yesterday, they finally get it. Our quarterly returns are strong, but more importantly, we're creating a sustainable model. 3 other towns have approached us about similar partnerships. And Elizabeth Blackwood, does she miss her old life?" Sarah smiled, touching the key that now hung permanently around her neck. "She's learning to be part of something bigger than profits, just like Sarah Mitchell learned to stop hiding from who she really was." They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the ranch house. May was on the porch, arguing good-naturedly with Claire, who'd become an unexpected ally in bridging the corporate and rural worlds. "Your sister's actually starting to understand ranch operations," Jack observed. "Yesterday she knew the difference between Herefords and Angus. And you're getting better at corporate negotiations," Sarah countered. "That deal you structured with the Denver restaurants was brilliant." "Well, I had a good teacher." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. Naturally, these moments of contact had been growing more frequent, more comfortable. "Speaking of teaching, I found something in the attic you should see." Inside his office, Jack pulled out a dusty blueprint tube, Dad's original plans for modernizing the ranch. "Look at this section. Sarah unrolled the yellowed papers and her eyes widened. There, in faded ink, were designs for solar integration, water conservation systems, and sustainable grazing patterns. Ideas decades ahead of their time. He couldn't implement most of it, Jack explained. Too expensive, too experimental for the banks to finance. But he saw the future coming. Just like you did, Sarah said softly, when you chose to trust me again, when I chose to trust us. Jack's correction was gentle. The person you were pretending to be, the person you really are, they're both part of who we are now. Sarah looked around the office, at the ledger that had once shown only losses, but now tracked growing success. At the photos on the wall, 3 generations of Harrisons now joined by new images of solar installations, heritage cattle, and community celebrations at the Saloon. I need to show you something too, she said, pulling out her tablet. The Foundation's new project. Jack studied. The proposal on the screen, the Crystal Creek Institute for Rural Innovation, a think tank but not the usual kind, bringing together ranchers, business leaders, environmentalists, people who usually talk past each other, creating solutions that work in the real world, not just on paper. And you want to base it here? If the town agrees. And, she hesitated, if you'll help run it. Nobody understands both sides like you do now. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Sarah held her breath, watching him process the idea. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Dad would have loved this. Using the ranch to shape the future instead of just surviving it. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, Jack pulled her close and kissed her. It was their first kiss since before her identity was revealed, and it felt like both an ending and a beginning. That's a yes, he murmured against her lips. To all of it, the Institute, the future, us. Outside, the sun was setting behind the solar arrays, casting long shadows across land that had sustained generations. Inside, 2 people who had learned to be their truest selves with each other held on to something rare and precious. A love, built on truth, tested by fire and stronger for the forging. 1 year later, the wedding invitation sat framed behind the Lucky Spurs bar, its elegant script telling a story far deeper than the words themselves. Elizabeth Sarah Blackwood and Jack Harrison request the honor of your presence as they unite. Their lives, their names, and their legacy at the Harrison Ranch and Crystal Creek Institute, where 2 worlds became one. The saloon hummed with activity as final preparations for the rehearsal dinner took place. The ancient bar gleamed in the afternoon light, its carved initials now joined by a brass plaque commemorating the founding of the Crystal Creek Heritage Partnership. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. Visiting chefs chatted with local ranchers about tomorrow's menu, featuring Harrison Ranch heritage beef. Corporate board members, who'd once pushed for hostile takeovers, now listened intently as May explained sustainable grazing techniques. Claire, wearing boots that no longer looked out of place, led a group of university students through their apprenticeship orientation. Having second thoughts? Jack's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms sliding around her waist. About marrying you? Never, she leaned back against him. Just thinking about how much has changed and how much hasn't. The Saloon still hosted Saturday night dances, though now they were likely to include visiting environmental scientists alongside local cowboys. The ranch still ran cattle, but the solar arrays and new water systems had made it more profitable than ever. And Sarah still kept her grandfather's toolbox in the corner, though these days it was used more for teaching traditional crafts than emergency repairs. The magazine article came out, Jack said, holding up his phone. The headline read, "The Blackwood Harrison Model, Revolutionizing Rural Development Through Heritage Preservation." Did they get it right? Mostly, though they missed the best part. He turned her to face him. They focused on the business success, not the heart behind it. Through the window, they could see the Institute's campus seamlessly integrated into The ranch land, modern buildings designed to complement, not overshadow, the traditional structures. Students and ranchers moved between them, each learning from the other. "Remember when you first hired me to fix this place?" Jack gestured at the saloon around them. "I remember being terrified you'd see through my act." "I did," he smiled. "I just saw something worth knowing beneath it." The door chimed as Mrs. Peterson entered, carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. "Found this in my attic, dears. Thought you might want it for the wedding display." Sarah unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a photograph she'd never seen. The saloon on its opening day in 1892, townspeople gathered proudly before its doors. "Look at their faces," she said softly. "They knew they were building something that would last, just like we are." Jack's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Naturally now, different times, same dream." The afternoon light caught Sarah's engagement ring, a simple band incorporating wood from the saloon's original bar, complemented by a small but perfect diamond. Like their life together, it merged elegance with authenticity, wealth with simplicity. Tomorrow, they would exchange vows under the big Wyoming sky, surrounded by the community that had become family. Their honeymoon would be split between the ranch and the Blackwood Industries offices, a balance they'd learned to strike with grace. "Almost time for the rehearsal," Jack reminded her, but Sarah lingered a moment longer, taking in the scene. The saloon that had once been her hiding place had become the heart of something remarkable. The man who had once been just a hired carpenter had become her partner in every sense, and she herself, no longer hiding behind either Sarah Mitchell or Elizabeth Blackwood, but finally genuinely whole. "You know what I love most about this place?" she said, turning to Jack. "It's not the success or the innovation. It's that everyone who walks through that door gets to be their truest self. Including you, especially me." She reached up to touch his face. "Thank you for seeing me, the real me, even when I was hiding." Jack's answer was a kiss, witnessed by a century of carved initials and a community that had learned to embrace both tradition and change. Outside, the sun set behind the mountains, just as it had for generations, while inside the Lucky Spur, past and future came together in perfect harmony, just like its newest owners. A cowboy who'd learned to navigate boardrooms without losing his soul, and a CEO who'd found her true worth in a small Wyoming town, where authenticity was the greatest currency of all.